All right, we are live. Thanks for joining me, everyone. Charles Moscowitz. We're also live on TikTok and on the usual stations. Michael D. Shaw is my guest. And Mike, thanks as always for joining me.
Always fun and good evening.
We're moving in the direction, it seems, of war. And so I don't think that it's anything other than the only thing that we really should be discussing here. And it's a scary situation because going to war against Iran is not like, we're not talking here about Grenada, or even Venezuela. This is a big one, and this could become a real quagmire. I have mixed feelings about it. I generally don't want to see the United States get involved in what George Washington called in his farewell address foreign entanglements. But at the same time, I'm not an isolationist. I think that we are of the world and in the world, whether we like it or not. And the question is, can this be done in a way that is going to be inflicting the least amount of pain, if any, on our brave men and women in uniform? Um, where are you with this, Mike? What do you think is going on?
Well, I kind of line up with you. I would add that we've been kind of pussyfooting this situation for way too long. Those old enough to remember the Carter administration and
Hmm.
the taking over the embassy and
Yeah,
so on, and Obama's strategy of giving Iran everything they wanted in return for, I guess, nothing at all, really. I would look at it this way. I don't know that there's wide and deep support for the regime within the people of Iran.
yes,
Um, I kind of feel that if it came to a war, it really wouldn't last terribly long because it's hard to believe that there's too many people that support this dictatorial regime. And
really doesn't seem to be internally in that country. People are out on the street. There's an estimate of upwards of 30,000 people that
yeah,
have been killed by the Iranian mullahs in their attempt to suppress what is probably the biggest rebellion since they started. Um, and it does seem to me to be there are some indications of a civilizational alignment going on here. On the one hand, you have Iran and its allies, Russia and China and North Korea, and some of the old remnants of the communist world. And then for the United States and Israel, and I'll get into that in a minute, um, you have the United Arab Emirates. They're calling it the Abrahamic Vice,
right.
and also apparently India is lending support. And India is another one of these sort of civilizational blocks right now. So this is like a major alignment. I think Europe, it doesn't really matter so much because they're kind of feckless anyway. But they're certainly not going to side with the Iranians.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Funny how now we can really legitimately dismiss Europe. I mean, you said
Yeah,
that in an offhanded way, but isn't that very telling?
yeah, exactly. They're not relevant. I'm sure they're not going to prevent the United States using military bases in Germany and Italy. And probably Italy is probably the best of all of them.
Yeah,
And I think that generally the other countries in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, even Syria, they're kind of, hoping that this happens quickly and that the United States is victorious. Now, of course, you have the anti-Israel and frankly, and some anti-Semitic people saying the United States is going to war for the Jews. And maybe, I don't know. I mean, I want to bring that up. I'm listening to E. Michael Jones doing an interview, and he's salivating over the possibility of Iran sinking the American um, ship, warship, which I believe is the Gerald R. Ford, and then of course Iran moving ahead and destroying Israel. Ah, this is what we want. And I think that, if
Yeah.
people,
By the way, he's totally lost the plot.
oh,
You know.
completely, but at the same time, I mean, the anti-Israel thing is such a cult-like thing that everything fits into the sieve of anti-Israelness that he's willing to see his own country get bloodied if it means destroying Israel. Anything and everything goes.
That's what happens when we've talked about this before. When people get so hung up on a point of view that they get into this trap where they just can't escape from it. Okay, you can have questions about American support for Israel, but you have to view that through the prism of who the hell else are you going to support in the Middle East? All right.
Right.
And, let's say what has been unsaid all this time. All right. And I'm going to say it. The fact is that Islam is not compatible with modern civilization, period. All
Yes.
right. So the only ally that we even remotely can have is some country that still, although I think they had their own problems with letting so many Arabs in, is a Judeo-Christian type of culture. That's it. People don't want to say it. People want to talk about, flower child, bring everybody in, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, you have to know who's lining up on your side and who's lining up against you. And this whole idea that, well, there's extremist Muslims and there aren't. Yeah, the extremists are the ones that are decapitating you, and the moderate ones are the ones cheering on the sidelines. And that's the way it is. All right.
Exactly.
So,
Even if I think I recall Michael Savage answered that issue when he said that the general estimate is that the extremist Muslims are maybe at most 10% of the Islamic population, but 10% of what is it, like 10
it's a
billion?
billion.
Yeah, I mean, that's a billion people. And, it's often the case that the more radical element are the ones who tend to set the agenda. They're the ones that call the shots. That's certainly been true of the left. Now, does the defeat of the Iranian mullahs, is that good for Israel? Yes, it is. I mean, that should be acknowledged.
I
Um,
think it's good for everybody.
Me too. I mean, Iran is the last big country that wants to destroy Israel. Other Arab countries have made peace with Israel. Maybe they don't love Israel, fine. But, I mean, Jordan, Egypt, Israel has developed relations even with Saudi Arabia. And it's really comes down to Iran. And to eliminate that country, it's very tempting. Now, I'm not saying that Israel is going to suddenly, everything is going to be, hunky dory. I mean, but, they are a major threat to Israel. They are trying to destroy Israel for reasons that can only be explained by radicalism. They've got nothing. Israel's never done, has traditionally had good relations with Iran going all the way back to Cyrus the Great. I mean, this is an
Especially,
old, right? I mean, this isn't this. They don't have any beef with Israel. And the Shah of Iran was, I mean, he didn't love Israel, but he maintained relations. Um, it was only when Khomeini came in and the radical mullahs that they suddenly decided that they would have to destroy the state of Israel. And I think they're the last ones in a regressive, old, rotten way to be. And at the same time, I would note that if they are eliminated, and I hope and I pray that they are, that doesn't mean that Islam can't continue to function as a civilizational power. They just have to do it in a way that only is civilized to the degree that they respect the rights and the sovereignties of their neighbors. They can't be. They have to end the jihad. They have to. They have to stop I mean, they have Sharia law, which they're trying to use to take over countries. They've been on the record. You have radicals saying that in Europe. You have radicals saying it right here in Dearborn, Michigan. And they're not going to do that. That has to stop. They can have Sharia law applied to certain degrees to their own people within countries that they don't control, as long as it's not too far out of bounds to American or to Western values of the countries that they live in. But they can't impose it on others. They can't, have polygamy.
But don't deny that that's what they would like, right?
Oh,
They
I
would
think
love
so.
if they could have Sharia in Britain, for example.
And they're probably going to have it. And,
Yeah.
there was a case where I think it was the papers of the Muslim Brotherhood, and I can't remember the details. They were discovered. This guy was like, stopped in his car and he was interrogated. I think he was like, probably, who knows, running a traffic light. And they found, they traced it back to his house and they found all the papers for the Muslim Brotherhood and other radical groups and how they plan to subvert the United States in a civilizational jihad. And they followed that. And it's a significant development. It sort of reminds me of when the Illuminati was exposed in 1784, because one of the couriers was arrested by a Bavarian cop on the highway, and all the papers of Adam Weishaupt were revealed. And that ended, that set them way back. Now, they didn't go away, but it kind of exposed their agenda. He was kicked out of Bavaria, and they went underground. This particular issue, and I need to get the details of it. I'm kind of coming on the show now, and I'm remembering this, but I'll have more information on it. But this is one of those moments where the true agenda is exposed. Now, again, nobody is telling Muslims, the left, their allies on the radical left are like, well, it's intolerant of people wanting to be Muslim. Not really. No one's telling Muslims they can't do whatever the hell they want, as long as they don't interfere with my ability as an American to do what I want.
Well, you know what? That's not even true, though. If they want to have honor killings,
Right.
you
And
kind of don't like that. Okay?
that's right. They can't have honor killings. They can't have child brides. They can't have women, they can't throw homosexuals off the roof. Whatever the hell else they're doing, they can't do that they can do it maybe in their own countries, and it's sad. And I hope those countries can advance into our modern age and reject those things, the way they treat women and all of it. But they have the right to sovereignty. If that's the society they want to have in Yemen, then they have a right to it. Unfortunately, I feel sad for the people that have to live under it, but that's what they've chosen. That's what they get. But they don't have the right to do it in Boston or in Texas, where they're trying to implement Sharia law.
Well, here's the problem. I mean, you're exactly right. But since the left hates America, they will tolerate anything that destroys the fabric of Western civilization. And Islam is a great way to destroy Western civilization, as history has shown, right?
Well, that's the left-green alliance. I mean, they do find common cause in an interest in destroying Western civilization, destroying the European nations and the United States and all of the nations that Professor Samuel Huntington identified as on the bloody borders of Islam. They're going to fight. And if they're going to fight and they're going to, threaten and going to try to subvert, that has to be met with a full open fist. That can't be tolerated. Again, if they want to practice whatever it is they're practicing, as long as it's not too far out of line with American jurisprudence, they're free to do it. Look at, you could even say the same thing. There are certain practices among a lot of religions that didn't comport to the United States, and they gave us up when they came here. They wanted to be American. but they still have their religion. I'm not disputing their beliefs, as long as they don't try to carry out those beliefs. In the case of jihad or in the case of Sharia,
Well,
on
besides the left, I think you have this other problem with the sort of feminization of Western society, in that if we could only all hold hands and sing kumbaya, everything is going to be all right. And we really won't recognize any threats whatsoever. And if we do, it's a conspiracy theory, right? So I think what's happened is that you've weakened, there's been a weakening of our resolve to the point that it actually gets this far. You know, we pussyfooted around with this for, let's be honest, since World War II ended. And now, as we say, the chits are coming in, right? Because we never had an aggressive
no,
foreign policy. You know, live and let live. The trouble is that there's plenty of ways that Venezuela, before we went in there and kicked butt, was attempting to disrupt the U.S. All right.
oh yeah,
And interestingly, you got people complaining about these drug boat interdictions
right.
because they've been so imbued with this feminized kumbaya culture that it just blows your mind until you realize this is, Chuck, 3 generations now of this crap. It's like the Marshall Plan for the entire world is still in effect. And it took Trump to break the piñata here. And yeah, there's going to be some outcry.
They have to be challenged both literally and proverbially in the course of conversation. I attended an event at my synagogue, and we were at a table, my wife and I, and it was a dinner, and it was in speakers and whatnot. And one of the people at the table is this ultra left wing rabbi, who, she was talking about that she's going to be having a mufti or a muftar with Muslims. And so I said, well, that's nice. What are you going to talk about? Are you going to mention the I word, Israel? You going to talk about Sharia? I mean, no. I mean, they're going to talk about bagels and lox. It's like, and they can all wiggle their toes and pretend, just not actually talk about anything real, anything substantive.
How can you be a left-wing rabbi, by the way?
Oh, very easily. There's a lot.
No, there's a lot of them. But I mean, how does being left-wing comport with Judaism?
It doesn't, and they don't talk about anything substantial. They just sort of sit around and they it's all left wing. It's sort of like a Peter, Paul, and Mary concert. Remember them?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Everybody, it's round the circle, round the da. It's just like there's nothing actual. There's no.
So they're holding hands and singing Kumbaya.
Yeah, they're not going to talk about anything to do with morality. They're not going to talk about the Torah, certainly.
So why do they even become rabbis? And for that matter, I'm not singling out Jews. Plenty of left-wing Christians too.
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, look at the Unitarians. I mean, it's kind of like, I mean, it's a good question. I'm like, well, why not just be like socialists or whatever?
Yeah.
What do you have to involve? Judy, you put the Jewish imprimatur on what you're doing.
Does it give them more credibility somehow?
Yeah, it's more credibility. It gives them a little bit of claim. They want to claim it and they want to subvert it, just like the left wants to.
But do they ever defend it? I mean, other than you in the entire world, does anybody else ever challenge them about how do these socialist left-wing beliefs comport with anything that's supposed to be Jewish?
Well, they tend to only travel in their own circles, and their circles is pretty wide. It's like very mainline left Protestant groups. Look what's happening in the Protestant church. It's vanishing. Right the National Council of Churches was a left wing. I mean, we mentioned none dare call it treason. John Stormer, he does a section on that, how the National Council of Churches was controlled by the left.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, the Catholic Church has actually been able to resist this to a very high extent because you've got hierarchy, you've got there are standards to get into that, and you can't go too far. But even there, look at
Well, you got plenty of left-leaning bishops, but you don't. Well, I don't know. You do see it, and when you challenge them on it, it's kind of similar. You get these. This guy's not a bishop. He kind of masquerades as a Christian, John Fogelsang, and he will.
I've had a couple of clashes with him on Twitter.
All right. Yeah. So you know this guy, and they have to bend themselves into a pretzel because he will say, "Well, the Gospels were distorted by the epistles of Paul. Jesus was actually not homophobic, and he was a flower child and whatnot, and just all this nonsense." And I guess
I've read the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and that's not who Jesus was. There was no flower child there.
No.
And when Jesus talked about love, it wasn't the lovey-dovey kind of love that the left is going to sit around and smoke, whatever they smoke, and wiggle their toes around a campfire. And the same thing with Judaism. And when we talk about love your neighbor, doesn't mean you literally, it's sort of like you're loving humanity and you're loving being alive. I mean, you're not like loving that person per se, that this person, you know what I mean? That's something that has to be earned. And yeah, they have a whole leftist, understanding of it. I mean, I think that, I suppose in the Catholic tradition, you've got, liberation theology in Latin America. I recall that when John Paul II visited Cuba, Fidel Castro told him that Jesus was a communist. And yet I think that John Paul left him some books to read as he was leaving, and he felt that Castro was actually starting to think about this stuff a little bit more deeply. But the point is that anybody can take the Gospels and just re-edit them and twist them and take out the stuff that's inconvenient for them and amplify other things and twist its meaning. I mean, there's an old-fashioned word for that. It's certainly amongst Christians and Jews. It's called heresy. Yeah. It's called apostasy. It's called blasphemy. You're abusing the word of God. You take, it doesn't mean that, Jews and Catholics share a tradition. We're not fundamentalists. We don't, sola scriptura. We tend to study the documents, and we have qualified people who have reached a level of moral standing in their own lives and in their communities, and in the terms of scholarliness, who have the ability to understand these things as a way to try to get closer to what God had in mind, not to create a new kind of a earthly thing. Catholics call it the scholastic movement. Jews, we call it the rabbinic movement.
Yeah.
And I think some Protestants also do this. I know that there's the other thing going on with Martin Luther, but the point I'm making here is that you have these leftists who have infiltrated all of the religions, especially Judaism, going back to the heresy of Shabtai Zvi and his false messiahship. And they basically have turned the whole thing on its head. People need to understand that.
But
it's our job.
It's a relatively recent phenomenon in Judaism.
It is. I mean, Judaism, if you take a look at the Talmudic rabbis and 1,000 years, it was an incredible record of high standards of morality, of ethics, of scholarliness, of example, and often in adverse situations. And I think it inspired the Christian world also, even though they may not want to admit it. and the Muslim world probably. Jews kept a very different and very set standard. They had their own rabbinic courts. They had their own rabbinic, what they called the kahal, which was the community where they would basically elect people to lead them. And they had very strong standards. You couldn't mess with them. If you were the heresy, you're out. They would you'd be gone. And that kind of fell apart. It didn't fall apart. I shouldn't say that, but it was seriously compromised by the ministry of Shabtai Zvi and his successor Jacob Frank, and that poison that entered into the body is still there, and it's still festering, and there is still this sort of low-level war going on between them and the Torah true rabbinic authorities who have tried to stand up to them and who have had successes and failures. But, it's an ongoing issue.
Well, within your own temple, what do you think the divide is?
Oh, it's overwhelmingly Sabbatian, my temple.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, and as are most of them. There are a couple of people that kind of, aren't, and they sort of are it's sort of like, supporting Trump. You don't do that in my temple. But there are a couple of people who do, and they keep a fairly low profile because the high ground is controlled by the Sabbatians and the Frankists. Even if they don't consciously think of themselves that way, that's who they are. And, in a sense, many of the Protestant religions are controlled by lesbians and Satanists.
Yeah.
Right? As Catholics have somehow been able to dodge the bullet so far. But it's really not, I'm saying this with optimism in that I believe that the Jewish covenant, it does continue with real people worshiping God, believing in our mission. I think that is something that is still there and that continues onward. I think it manifests at different times and in different ways. One of those manifestations actually was the creation of and the foundation of the state of Israel. A friend of mine recently didn't agree with me on that, in that she pointed out to me that Shabtai Zvi was a Zionist and that he wanted an Israel that was, I wouldn't say satanic, but, antinomian, let's put it that way. And I think that's true to an extent. I think there is a strain in Israel that is Sabbatian, always has been. It's not a perfect place. But the late Rabbi Marvin Antelman, the author of a book about Sabbatians, the name of his book escapes me right now, To Eliminate the Opiate. Great man. He's passed away. I had him on my show. He pointed out to me that Israelis do believe in God, even if they don't admit it, and that they do follow the Torah just by being there, just by, you can't be in Israel without fulfilling elements of the Torah, whether you like it or not. It's just the fact of living there and in that atmosphere. And it is an incredible place. I've been there many times. You feel it. There's something going on there spiritually, something that is really cannot be defined, but it's a powerful feeling. It's a powerful experience. And I think that all Israelis feel that, and somehow it explains the incredible resilience of that society in the face of very, very adversarial situations. Any other society would fall apart when they face some of the stuff they face. And yet they continue to have this incredible spirit. And I do think that there is something going on there in terms of the coming of a Messiah and the entrance into a messianic age. Now, I'm not here to, to say that I know something about this. It's simply a matter of belief. But in the Judaic understanding, it'll happen only if and only when the children of Israel and the entire world reaches a certain level of spirituality, that we're really ready for it. It doesn't just, it's not going to be just coming in and doing something. It has to be earned. I mean, in Judaism, we differ with Christianity only in one way, many ways, but in one way, in that we believe that we are saved by earning it, by doing things, by living a certain way, by advocating certain things, by trying to change the truths. And that's what we'll be reckoning with in the world to come. That's how we're saved. We save ourselves, and we do it through actions, and we through also, and through observance, and through prayer, and through good deeds, and through love.
Well, that's not entirely different from the Catholic point of view, that you need faith and works. It's
Yes.
only the Protestants that will tell you faith alone.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm just wondering, on a personal basis, would this ratio of these Frankian types be different if you were in a conservative or Orthodox?
Yes. The Orthodox are much more free of it, not completely.
Yeah.
But and also the Frankists. The only reason why they control the high ground is because they're loud and they're scary and they have power.
Yeah.
And people, we, by nature, we've talked about this. We don't want to think about things like this, evil and satanic people. We're struggling now with the Jeffrey Epstein stuff. We talked about that last week. I want to bring it up again.
Oh, absolutely. Well, you've seen the editorials, I think, in the Wall Street Journal, that were sort of poo-pooing this whole thing.
Right. Well,
none of this really happened. Yeah, there were a couple of bad guys, but everything else is BS.
And it's so evil and it's so despicable that we don't want to think about it. We don't want to think about our fellow citizens, like, I don't know, the Clintons. Not to single them out necessarily, but we don't want to think about people doing this kind of stuff. I mean, it's so ugly. And I think the same thing, the same dynamic, there's probably a sociological term for this because I'm studying sociology, but we basically yield to these powerful voices because it's in our interest to do so. We want to have a career. Yeah. We want to have a life. We want to have a family that speaks to us. We want to have friends. We want to have girlfriends, whatever. We want to, they control, they have to use the powers, I'm not talking just about blatant political and financial power. I'm talking about social power, the power to shun people, the power to destroy a person based on destroying their reputation by having them excluded and, left out. These are powerful things. Like this is a tribal thing. I mean, it's like a kid being denied, being not invited to a children's birthday party, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Or, being like shunned in the schoolyard.
Well, it's one thing to not want to think about it, but it's a whole other thing when the Wall Street Journal says, no, it's BS, it didn't exist, which made me immediately think of Elon Musk saying some months ago, Wall Street Journal is a terrible paper now. Why does anybody read it? And when I read that editorial, I thought, oh, wow. He's completely correct.
I'll have to read that. I mean, look, I think that not only does it exist, but it is changing the way it's huge. It's much bigger than we can imagine in that it is changing the way we perceive things. It's exposing the dark side of this whole rotten establishment, both public and private, both financial and intellectual, both spiritual and political, all of it. You have this ugly underbelly that we've been talking about for years. We've been talking, the John Birch Society has talked about this going back when I used to have those guys on. This is, immoral, it's rotten, it operates on its own plane of legality for sure. It's secretive. It vindicates most of the conspiracy theories that we've talked about, and specific conspiracy theories like Pizzagate. I think that's been vindicated. Oh yeah, we now know that all that talk about pedophiles and Hollywood, the big politicians, the Rhino Republicans, the Democrats, overwhelmingly involved with satanic rituals, pedophile. I'm gonna lose. Okay, before we go further, I'm just gonna say goodbye to TikTok. This is too much for TikTok. TikTok, everyone over there, thanks for joining me.
But you didn't get a specific warning, though.
I haven't got a warning, but it's coming, so I'm going to shut it off. You can check out the show on Rumble, Charles Moscowitz Live. I want to thank you for joining me this evening. Have a wonderful evening. Let me just shut that off. End. Okay, so much for TikTok. I don't want to get another strike. They don't go for this sort of thing. And now we're getting into the nitty-gritty of it.
Yeah.
The stuff they're doing has been discussed by people who are attacked, including you and I, and certainly people I know, for the past decades, and as being wacky conspiracy theorists and the tin hat. All of it, or 90, probably 95% of it, is now vindicated. It is as bad as anyone had said. The pedophilia, the satanic rituals, the adrenochrome, probably all of it. QAnon.
But have you ever asked yourself? I mean, I agree with you completely. But have you ever asked yourself when you're going to see an editorial in the LA Times? Wow, this stuff is all true. We were stupid.
Oh, they're completely ignoring it, and and I think that they're continuing to try to go after you. They thought they would get it to go after Trump. Now, I don't know. I honestly don't think that Trump's involved in it, but you never know. I mean, there were some wild things being said about him. My feeling about it is that if Trump really was involved in this cult, we would already have known about it a
Oh, there's no doubt.
I mean, they wouldn't have gone through all the trouble of, putting him on trial and trying to throw him in prison and shooting at him and trying to bankrupt him and attacking his family and his reputation and years of that. They wouldn't have had to have gone through all that trouble. They could have just said, here it is, So I just don't think so. And I think that there's more evidence to indicate that Trump was actually the whistleblower on Epstein, and that he was
actually the first one.
Yeah, and he was working with the FBI, and that he mentioned that there's all these thousands of mentions. That's because of that skunk author, that tabloid author Wolf, writing his book about Trump. He was close to Epstein, and that's all they talked about. Epstein despised and feared Trump, I think. And they were plotting to, just like Hillary Clinton and Obama and all those deep staters set up the Russiagate thing. I think they were a lot of those conversations were plots to try to discredit Trump and smear him. That's my opinion on it. It seems to me to be basic common sense that's what happened.
Yeah, I would agree. But it's going to be a long time before you see that as an editorial in major media. They just don't want to talk about it.
They've never apologized for Russia. They've never, the New York Times, to its credit, they'll put something on the back page, like 6 months later, they admitted that the Hunter Biden laptop was real. But that was, after after Biden was installed and his regime. Then this is how the Globe works too. They'll admit something after they get.
Yeah, when it doesn't matter.
That's right. They'll wait till after the election's over. It's a few days before Christmas on a Friday night, and they'll put a little something, just to maintain some, modicum, some fig leaf of credibility.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's how they roll. But other than that, we're never going to see this in the mainstream media ever. They'll go down with the ship. I mean, they're not going to. But yet, because of alternative media and because of good people who are investigating it, I'm following several of them. You probably are too. Um, it's going to get out there, and people are going to be aware of it, and it's having international ramifications. It's reverberating across the plane. I mean, today, Europe, they're having it. It was all the aristocratic class. All of these people were, are involved in it. I don't know if we'll ever get to the full truth, but we've got enough to go on. There's certainly enough to last for years in terms of investigating.
Yeah, I mean, I was amazed, even as a world-class cynic, how many of these high diplomatic people in Europe were caught up in this thing.
Yeah.
You ask yourself why, but there they were.
Yeah, I mean, the European royal families, I mean, I have a feeling they've always been a little bit, different anyways in terms of moral standards. Who knows what really goes on there? But, they've they've all been caught up. The British royal family, the Norwegian family, the Danish family, they all have, they're all deep in as George H.W. Bush would say, they're in deep doo-doo. They're all, they've been exposed. And I think that people are starting to realize the nature of those who are the ruling class, who rule us, and that they're at war to save their own power. They're at war with the people. I mean, they are, it's kind of almost a counter revolution at this point.
Why do they maintain these royal families in Europe anymore?
It didn't really bother me. I always thought it was just part of their tradition. It's sort of left over from feudal times. It's, it's a little bit of pomp and ceremony, and they have, I mean, I think it's a little overdone. It could be maybe a little more low key, but, it's sort of like a ceremonial position where they can represent their country, at least publicly, and do so with a certain amount of dignity, you'd hope, but they seem to have lost that. I mean, they don't have it now. And that was really the only thing they did offer.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't seem to really comport with this sort of socialistic European Union type mentality somehow. I've never really understood it.
I mean, it's just a leftover from medieval times. It's tradition.
Yeah.
And that's the case in I mean, it's not just Europe. I mean, Japan still has an emperor.
Yeah.
I think that Thailand,
which really blows my mind because he didn't actually do too well. The aftermath of World War II, that was.
Well, he was. I mean, from what I've read, and I'm not big on history of the Japanese theater, but he was basically under house arrest. I mean, throughout that war, and he was told that, and he was told that if he steps out of line, he'll be killed. That you had the radical regime of Tojo take over in 1938 after he deposed Kanoi, who was the more moderate prime minister, and then immediately read the riot act to the emperor. You had to stay in the house. You don't have to come out unless we let you out. So, that's what happened, I think, there.
Well, I wonder what sort of valor and virtue he showed, even if that's true, which I'm not sure it's 100% true, but assuming it is, wouldn't it have made an impression if he does sacrifice himself, maybe to convince me? Because what I've always wondered about that position is you sort of can't have it both ways, all right? If these kamikaze types were supposedly inspired by uh, the holiness of the emperor, but yet he was really not even a figurehead. He was just a puppet that they trotted out on occasion.
Right. Hmm.
I
How
I
did
don't
we
know.
continue? I don't know. I mean, after the war, MacArthur basically pulled the chestnuts out of the fire and basically said, brought him out to like a market, made him meet people, shake people's hands, showed that he's just a guy, and he kind of humanized him. And I think that sort of saved it. Um, and he was no longer seen as this godly figure. I think in Japanese Shinto religion, I mean, the emperor was viewed as a,
Right.
a demigod. Um, but I mean, it's the business of these nations. I mean, I don't really care for it personally. I mean, the United States, we rejected it. I don't get it, but it's their business, if they want to have that institution. But it does seem to have been tarnished.
Well, inevitably, it gets corrupt. I mean, we know in modern times, uh, you have a Prince Andrew situation
Right.
coming out in the Epstein things. You've got all these, relatives of the royal family that are basically scumbags that are
You know,
being
I,
supported by.
I don't think they're in big trouble. I mean, I think that, because they were covering up for him, and you've got who knows what else they were doing. And then they had that guy, Neville Saville or someone, or
Yeah, yeah.
one of the biggest pedophiles in history. I mean, he was very close
Jimmy
to
Savile. Yeah.
Jimmy Savile, yeah, very close to the royal family for decades. Probably almost brought them up, right? I mean, there's a lot going on there, and I don't know if they're going to survive it. I mean, it's just too much. I mean, there were all these rumors that Australia was going to drop the royal family once Elizabeth died, but they didn't. Um, I think that maybe some of the dynamic is the dynamic between President Trump and this new sort of civilizational alliance of nations and the old British Anglo, Commonwealth thing that might help save them because it's a symbol. I know that like Mark Carney of Canada, right after he came to power and after he had a public falling out with Trump, who put in tariffs, he invited Charles, the king, to come to Ottawa to open the parliament, which is something that I think had only been done once or twice before.
Right.
And it was just symbolic. He was like telling the United States that we're not, we're continuing the old world way. And that he basically handed Charles a speech to read. And he's just a figurehead. But the speech took a few mild swipes at Trump. But it was a reassertion of Canadian sovereignty under this phony.
Well, hey, how do you reassert your sovereignty if you bring in some royal figure?
Canada is. I mean, that's their history. They were, they were loyalists. They were Tories.
Yeah.
That's what, and they were traditionally an enemy of the United States, right up until Teddy Roosevelt tried to change that. But I mean, all in all, I mean, I feel better about what I'm seeing going on with the upcoming midterm. I think the Republicans are going to do okay. Um, they There's been a couple of special elections that Republicans did very well on state levels and better than anybody thought they'd do, in spite of the fact that the Democratic candidate had all the money pouring in and all the pro media. And I think that the big left wing heroes of the party have collapsed. You got Mamdani. I mean, basically, he as
That didn't take long, did it?
it's completely imploded. And I think that as Eric Adams was leaving office, he told Mamdani not to mess around with the policy of homeless people because Mamdani wanted to do like what they did in San Francisco, basically you're not to interfere with them. You're not to bother them. Police aren't to help them or hurt them. Just stay away from them. As if there's something progressive about that. And the result was, and Adams warned him publicly that people would be hurt. And sure enough, 2 weeks into his administration, you had that major freeze. 27 people froze to death on the streets of
Yeah.
New York. There's the bloods on his hands. I mean, it's a complete disaster. And normally, in a case like that, the mayor would have people swept up and put into some kind of a shelter. He didn't do that. And I think that was the beginning of the end. This stupid, weird, utopian policies that make no sense are catching up. And the state is turning on him. Even Hochul is turning on him. The state legislature is not going to give him more taxes. Here in Massachusetts, we have a very popular governor who wants more taxes and a mayor, but they refuse to do the audit. There's
Yeah.
there's going to be a forensic audit, like a Doge type audit, in the state. That we have a state auditor, Diane DeZoglio, who ran for office on the position that she would do the audit. That's her job. She's an auditor. It's a state constitutional position. And they refused to let her do it. The governor, the state legislature, and the state court and the attorney general all refused. This is like, they don't have any, they're very secretive about where they spend the money. They will not release that.
Well, what's the public posture
Well,
of
they,
others?
to just, what she did then was she got an initiative on the ballot. Massachusetts, like California, has these ballot initiatives to do the audit. That won very handily, something like 75%. And they're still refusing to do it. Now, I don't know how.
What's the public argument that they put on WBZ about why they're not doing it?
I really haven't heard them make a coherent argument. I mean, of course, the Boston Globe is completely in the tank for them. I mean, they're not even covering it. They won't even mention it. And they just are like, they're like, well, we need to go through the attorney general, who I think otherwise is a pretty good attorney general, even though she's a left winger. But on this issue, she's like, well, there are some legal hurdles we need to get over to do the audit. In other words, they're just going to drag their feet and stall and stall and stall. And meanwhile, the state has $2.5 billion overage on the deficit. It's increased by $10 billion under her administration, that being Maura Healey. And everybody knows damn well where the money went. It went to giving housing and food and cash to all of the illegal aliens who were shipped in during the Biden years. I mean, we all saw this. I saw it. I saw these hotels up in Concord and Lexington. You have these, they're filled with the illegal aliens, most of whom are men and most of whom are not poor. They got their good leather coats. They look well fed. They got cars, and they're getting a lot of money, and they're living free on the dime of the Massachusetts taxpayer. And
ironically, in the very towns that were the beginning of the revolutionary movement.
Never mind that. I mean, exactly. I mean, they salt them away in these hotels and they sign these contracts. The hotel doesn't care. They're getting rich off of this. They had a contract with a local Italian caterer to give them 3 meals a day. But most like working people don't get fed that well. And they're not doing anything. It's like there's no rational explanation for this. I mean, is this supposed to be a virtue?
Well, what does the average blue-collar guy in Worcester think about this?
He doesn't like it. I mean, these are people who, most of them come from either Arab countries or African countries. They're not really Hispanic, and it's just a very strange. It's never really been explained. I mean, this is the whole thing we've been talking about with the Somalians in Minnesota and in Maine and in Columbus, Ohio. Why is it a virtue for this country to have brought hundreds of thousands of Somalians in and settled them in those cities and given them, I don't know, they're probably most of them are on welfare of some sort. But then, it's like, why is this? What is the left? This is they're championing this. They've never explained it. Why this
Well,
is?
I can explain it. Okay, the Democrats have long since abandoned caring about anything that benefits the typical American. So to stay in power, they have to bring in these clients, right? Whether it's Somalians or these immigrants you're talking about in Massachusetts, and hopefully get them registered to vote,
Right.
create these power blocks. So it's
That's
completely negative. They don't stand for anything, these Democrat politicians, but there's so many power bases, like you talk about the Boston Globe or whatever. You can't convince me that some schmuck reporter on the Boston Globe who's getting a crummy salary and try to, afford his 2-bedroom apartment is really in line with this.
Well. First of all, to even work at the Boston Globe, I mean, this is probably a big litmus test. The Globe has its culture, and you don't mess with it. You don't work. You don't get in the door of the Globe unless you know swear a loyalty oath to several issues. I remember.
So you're going to be so deluded that you will go against your own interests.
Yeah, and the Globe will tell you this. I don't want to go off the issue, but the Globe told me personally when I ran for Congress, a couple of things: don't do this and don't do that, and we'll give you coverage. If you do these things, we're going to kill you. I mean, that's how they roll. One of those things was do not come out against gay marriage. That was the big issue that year. Had nothing to do with Congress. It was a state issue. But that's what they were doing that year, and that's what you played ball or you were out. I mean, that's how they roll. I mean, this is power. And I don't know what, if you scratch the surface, I don't know why they, what is their agenda, other than maybe that they're part of the Sabadian Frankist conspiracy. I don't know, the Illuminati. I mean, I don't know. It's just they have a very set culture, and they call the shots. They still do. The Globe is still a powerful force. I mean, oh yeah, I mean, and and they were owned by the New York Times. They were bought by the New York Times several years ago. So it's is this like, is it what Steve Bannon says, the last gasp of a dying regime? I don't know. I hope so.
Well, you're right. There has to be a litmus test. I mean, if you read the LA Times, even the quote conservative editorials are left wing. I mean, the most conservative they ever get is your old buddy Jonah Goldberg, and the only reason they allow him to write anything is that he hates Trump.
Yeah, he's a Trump hater. Here in Boston, you had Jeff Jacoby, who was the House conservative, and he's not. I mean, and during the election of the one with John Kerry in 2004, they laid him off for the whole political season. They couldn't even tolerate any criticism of that. They found
the Boston Herald, wasn't he?
No. Well, that's Don Feder from the Boston Herald.
Oh, I'm sorry. Right.
Yeah, he was fired, and it was very bitter. But and they got rid of him. But I'm talking about Jeff Jacoby, who was kind of like, as I say, he was the House conservative, still is. But he is, by national standards, he's no conservative.
No, he was a pretty gelded conservative.
Yeah, and he, once in a while he kind of tiptoes to the edge, but that's about it. Just a little bit of boo bait. The Herald actually has been doing a pretty good job lately with covering Massachusetts, but I mean, I don't see. I mean, it would be amazing to see this state get some kind of an upsurge. I mean, there were 3 Republicans running for governor. All 3 of them are good. I hope that they're not going to dilute their energy by running against each other. It would be good if they
Well,
could
in
just.
California, a similar thing is happening, but you also have a bunch of Democrats trying to run for governor, including, and this isn't enough material to write a whole piece on, but this Katie Porter thing that was covered in the national media a few months ago.
Minute?
Yeah, okay. Katie Porter was anointed as being the Democratic front runner for governor. Okay, who is she? She's a fat, ugly woman who was a 2 or 3 term congressional representative from Irvine. Okay, first of all, no one in the state even knew who she was. Nobody really cares about Irvine. Yeah, that's where the university is, and it's a fairly wealthy district, Newport Beach and so on. And someone just proclaimed that she was the one until she got out in public, and it's like ugly all the way to the bone, right? Her personality just sucks. There were clips of her berating staff members.
So she's still in the contention after that scandal.
She's lower down than she was, but Eric Swalwell, believe it or not, is the leading Democrat for the governorship. We'll see how it goes. I mean, it's completely corrupt.
Any Republicans involved or not?
Well, yeah. I mean, but no one prominent by national standards. There's a guy who is a Riverside County sheriff. There's a couple of others. On the Democratic side, Tom Steyer, everybody's favorite communist billionaire. Yeah. So it's going to be fun to see how that works.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's the same old
Not
people.
really expecting anything, but Gavin Newsom is just being discredited on a daily basis.
What about the business of the Voter ID Act? It passed the House. I don't know where it is in the Senate, but I think that is going to be a big boost for the Republicans if that gets.
It's a big boost if it passes, but there's too many rhinos. And
how can they possibly be? 85% of Americans support.
Doesn't matter.
You know, something say it's racist, then why is it that 65% of Black people support it? I mean, it doesn't. And yet they're going. I mean, how can? I mean, and I get the fact that the Democrats need that because that's the only way they can steal. But how can anyone? I mean, which I think that even them. I mean, how could they support that?
Well, you have to look at it this way: it's a club atmosphere, right? This would all end with term limits, but good luck getting term limits. All right. This even applied, and I wrote about this. It was condemned for it, by the way, how there could be a relationship between Scalia and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. All right. It made no sense until you view it through the obvious prism. This is all a freaking game. Okay. They're in this little sewing circle together.
Right.
None of them stand for anything. I
think he stood for some things. I mean, and I've read about that a little bit, and there were a couple of instances where Ruth Bader Ginsburg was having a complete meltdown, and she was running into his office and screaming at him. And how could you support this? But
right, that's what I'm saying, Chuck. That how can you maintain a friendship with someone who you supposedly disagree with on everything? How is that?
My answer to that is it's not easy.
Well, no, I'm saying that you're playing a role.
Yeah.
Okay. You have your day job, and then you have the rest of your life. And I would say she was more of a true believer than him, but I'm afraid that the guy was a little overrated because people were so use the Bruce Springsteen analogy. All right. I feel he's one of the most overrated acts in the history of popular music. His success largely based on the fact that he was a heterosexual alternative to the very effeminized Michael Jackson at the time. All right. That's what happened. And there were people
He
that
was
were,
out of nowhere, plucked out of nowhere, and he was on the cover of all the magazines
yeah, yeah.
simultaneously. The next, big thing. I mean, it was like very contrived. I mean, how that
Well,
happened.
what proves the point is an act that did Bruce Springsteen better than Bruce Springsteen ever did himself was Johnny Mellencamp. And
Right,
yeah, he had some hits, but he never achieved the fame that Springsteen did.
right,
And Mellencamp was just as much of a liberal,
yeah.
but he wasn't the favorite act. Maybe because he was a Midwest guy, not East Coast. I don't know.
That whole
But
business is was. I mean, I don't think it's so much now, but it was very controlled with gatekeepers. I
yeah,
remember I had on someone who was wrote a book about Christian rock, Christian musicians, and how they were able to sort of sidestep the gatekeepers. But I remember he said, I should look him up and maybe have him back, but he said there were about 5 or 6 gatekeepers in the 60s, 70s, and through the 80s, and even, beyond, who really decided who was going to make it and who wasn't.
right.
One of those people was Clive Davis from Arista Records. Another one was Ahmet Ertegun from Atlantic Records. They decided, and you had to conform to a certain way of being, a certain way of looking, a certain way of sounding. It was all very kind of like, you had to go through that. And if you didn't, you weren't going to get in, you weren't going to make
Right.
it. It was
Now,
that,
fortunately, with the internet, that's kind of broken up.
yeah,
There's plenty of acts that make money just by streaming. They don't have to go through the
you have
gatekeepers.
your own record company now, develop your
And
own.
that's been the improvement.
Yeah.
And I was actually having this conversation a couple of weeks ago with someone who's in the TV business, who's actually a neighbor. And I said, I knew a guy at Capitol Records, I won't mention his name, who got out when he knew he could see the writing on the wall that this was going to fall apart. And he left in the late 1990s, kind of involved with other aspects of music, but he got out of the record business and he was a vice president. And he was a pretty powerful guy, but he was smart. This isn't going to last.
Right.
And, he could see the way it was headed. A lot of them didn't. So,
And now they continue to limp along, and they have their Grammy, and they have their,
yeah.
and they don't have the following that they had.
No, they're not following. And for what it's worth, Billie Eilish is getting hell for her statement about no one's illegal on stolen land.
Am I wrong I believe that she's being now sued by
The Indian tribe.
Yeah, because they're like, hey, you've publicly stated that you're on stolen land. Guess what? Check out the summons. We want it back. Since it's been a public declaration. And yet they continue on with this crap. I don't know. I mean, I feel, as I say, optimistic about this midterm, and I know that it's there's so much at stake, and it's the enemy is going to do whatever they have to do to win. I don't know what they're going to pull. I mean, we said this during the last election, and it turned out okay, even though I remember how everybody was on edge. What do you think is going to happen?
I think we're going to do okay. They're going to try everything they can, but they always do the wrong thing. If you're going to trot out AOC, and we didn't even talk about that whole disaster, it's like there's nobody on the bench.
They don't have anybody coming up to bat. She's there complaining to the New York Times about the way she was covered. It was mortifying. It really was a disgrace. And yeah, they don't have anyone that I can think of.
Isn't there anyone around her saying, you know what? You're stupid. Don't get out there. Be like Biden. Really? Okay, that's the model. He knew he was stupid. So he avoided saying too many things. And if he did screw up, which he always did, well, he stutters and he's joking. And well, that's just old Joe. But with her, they can't make an excuse because she's more stupid than he was.
Do you think that she was the one they were going to anoint?
I don't think so. I think that that was her little trial balloon.
I mean, she makes Kamala Harris look like Winston Churchill.
Yeah, yeah. It was pathetic, and of course, she's being defended on the various talk shows on the networks. Well, you know, it was one little mistake. And Trump, come on.
But
so what are they going to do? Put up Gavin Newsom?
Well, I think that he's deeply flawed. So, I mean, look at they pulled Obama out of complete obscurity and they invented him
because they had nobody else.
But do you think they have another one like that in the next maybe month or so?
That's kind of a loaded question, Chuck. No one in the world even heard of Barack Obama. So are you saying, is there some obscure politician somewhere in the 50 states that they could find? Maybe. I certainly don't know everybody.
That's the question. I mean, they're going to pull someone out from under a rock somewhere.
But I don't think that the Obama model per se is going to work quite as well. All right. His appeal was he had this appearance. He was an effeminate, non-threatening, so-called black guy.
Right.
But you don't have that sort of racial armor quite anymore. You still have it a little bit.
It's been done.
But, I don't know what the model is. You know, maybe there's some Eskimo politician from Alaska that we've never heard of.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know.
I can't think of anybody. I mean, they're all so bad, horrible. I mean, they're worse than even, AOC.
Well, that's it. I mean, they're all pretty bad. Like the new mayor of Seattle or the governor of Virginia.
Yeah.
These horrible left-wing women that have never had any life, that lived in this socialistic bubble. If that's as good as they can do, now to their credit, people elected these morons. All right.
Yeah.
But on a national level, I don't think it's going to happen.
No, I don't see it. So, Mike, what do you have coming up?
Well, we got a few things in the hopper. I had that piece last week.
Yep.
Got to get something published here pretty quick. In fact, I've actually heard from readers, what's the next one? So it's like, okay. Which is why, by the way, my Substack is free, because I would feel so bad if I didn't have regular output. We'll
see what happens.
I suspect there's something to write about with the horrible, horrible white liberal woman phenomenon.
Always a little chestnut, for sure.
So anyway, we will try to keep going. As always, a lot of fun. And
thank you. Talk to you next week.